I was very believing in this diet and I started my restaurants with the most pure intentions of that this is what was best for the planet, the whole food vegan. I never served Impossible Burgers. I never served any kind of like Beyond Meat or any kind of fake meats in my restaurants ever. In 13 years that we've had vegan restaurants, I never did that. But 2013, I listened to a TED Talk with with Graham Sate, and I thought, wow, food waste is really the problem. Cows are not the problem. And I'm running this restaurant. We're throwing away so much food into the food waste, and there's no composting in LA at this time. And so I decided I'm going to set out to have a vegan farm, and I'm going to rescue animals. I'm going to do regenerative agriculture, and I'm going to prove that you can do regenerative agriculture and no animals need to die. And I'm going to grow all the food for my family, and I'm going to grow food for the restaurants, and it's going to be amazing. Well, I proved myself wrong. I proved myself 100% wrong. The first thing is, if you're growing all your own food, it's so hard to grow enough calories for your family with just fruits and vegetables and nuts and berries. Like, I remember sitting there breastfeeding my now 4-year-old, I guess, might have been my now 7-year-old, I'm not sure which one, but I'm breastfeeding them, and I'm looking at my next older one drinking a Tetra Pak of some kind of oat milk or whatever. And I have a cow on the farm that we got from my dad that was pregnant when we got it, and it's 2/4 of the breast the calf is not drinking. And so we're milking the raw milk onto the ground to express it so she doesn't get mastitis. And I'm thinking to myself, this is crazy. If my breast milk is gold and has all the microbiology for this whole environment, that cow, Una, I still have Una. When you guys come to the ranch, you can pet her. Una's breast milk has to be gold as well. It also has to have all the microbiology and all the fighting of this environment, but a dirtier version of this environment. So why am I letting my kid drink oat milk from Costco? This is crazy. And I was like, that's it. No more milk in a box. Mommy says no more milk in a box. We're drinking raw cow's milk from now on, right? And then, so that was the first, like, one cow can give you 3-4 gallons of milk a day. That's so much calories that if you were just going to be only surviving yourself, it's so much calories. Like, where you're just like, what can I do? Making cheese, making yogurt. Okay, I got this, that. I'm making whey. I'm dehydrating whey in the freeze dryer. You know, so much calories that are coming from one cow milking. And so this idea that we could just easily grow vegan food for the whole planet, it's crazy. And what would the inputs be if, let's say, this hypothetical world where we're going to all just eat pea protein burgers
and bugs.
No, bugs are not vegan, but okay, yeah. So the powers that be are interested in the bug thing, though, for sure. I just saw a thing about maggot milk. Have you seen the maggot milk?
Oh,
it's like it makes a dairy substitute by boiling these larvae of some kind.
who is spearheading that project?
I don't know. I've seen it on Instagram.
We need to get them on the podcast. That's terrible.
It's so disgusting. But back to the thing is, right now, all of our inputs for vegetables, and I'm not anti-vegetables. I'm a vegetarian. Like, I'm not anti-vegetables, just to say this. Like, but all the inputs from vegetables are coming out of the meat system. Bone meal, blood meal, manure, chicken shit. I mean, these are these are the things that are the inputs for growing all organic vegetables. And so when we think about this, what are the inputs going to be? And then people say, oh, you could buy hay and you could compost it and you could mulch it. Okay, so what are the inputs for the hay? If we're getting rid of all the farm animals. You're just going to have a couple in a zoo for people to look at. Like, remember when cows were here? Like, if this is where are the inputs coming from? And then people send me, oh, I found this vegan farm. And it's like they're harvesting bat guana. They're harvesting guana from seagulls. Okay, well, there's a few places in the world where there's inputs that you could just go and scoop up for sure. But having animals on a farm and then utilizing those inputs on that same farm is obviously the most sustainable. I hate that word. It means to sustain and to stay the same. So we don't want to do that. Is obviously the most logical thing. We've gotten so efficient in our agriculture that we have pig farming over here, cow farming over here, corn farming over here, vegetable farming over here. And now these guys need fertility and these guys have a lagoon that's killing. They need so much manure, they don't know what to do with it. We have to go back to a system where everything's working together.
Yeah. So it sounds like, so you essentially had this almost like light bulb moment or epiphany where you have this perfectly healthy cow that's got, you know, this nutrient dense milk that's loaded with saturated fat, fat soluble vitamins, digestive enzymes, everything that we know raw milk. And you're like, I'm squeezing this into the ground and then giving my kid this like 16 ingredient oat milk to fit the box of a plant-based diet. And that's kind of when everything clicked for you.
Well, it was multiple things, but that was
a big moment.
That was a big moment. Another big moment is two other big moments. So I had a bunch of ducks, and I was just letting the ducks make more ducks, and I was not culling any of the boys' drakes because I'm a vegan, and so I'm not going to kill nothing. Okay, this was the mantra. Nothing. We don't kill anything on the farm. If it dies of natural causes or whatever, we don't kill anything on the farm. Meanwhile, cognitive dissonance, just for the record, my husband's like going to Vaughn's and buying meat. Like, my husband still eats meat every day. My husband's like going to the taco truck down the street. But anyways, nothing dies on my farm, my vegan mindset. And so the drakes are, every time there's a clutch of eggs hatching, half of them are boys and half of them are girls, give or take. So in the wild, this would never happen. They'd get pushed off and there would be one boy and he would have a territory and there'd be some females and there would not be 1,000 boys. And then I got these new ducks and they were like little babies. I raised them up by the house on the front porch and then they were teenagers and I brought them into the avocado orchard and I was so excited and they were going to eat all the snails and do their regenerative thing. And I'm getting ready to go to work and I let them out and it's raining. I remember it was so, and I was like, oh, they're so happy in the rain. And my husband calls me. He's like, you're not going to be happy about this, honey. I say, what happened? And he said, all your ducks got raped to death. I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, there was too many boys, and they just were so excited about these teenage girl khaki Campbell ducks, and they just continued to bred them. And by the time I got over there was just 2 that I had to put down. Wow. And they were still humping on them when I got there. And I realized that my interference, me thinking that I could somehow say that I could make a decision and less death would happen, that I could say, no, nothing's going to die on my farm. And then what happened was 19 female ducks got raped to death when they were very young because I didn't manage the male to female ratio in a proper way. Mm-hmm. And so, that was the first time that I allowed something to be killed on my farm. The next day I said, somebody do something about those boys. And my husband was like, do what? And I was like, I don't want to know about it, but we need those boys to be gone. And then my husband harvested them and took all the feathers out and froze them and put them in a freezer away in the barn so I didn't have to look at them. Because this is I'm just giving you a sense of where my mind was. And then we had 11 sheep, and they were grazing at a neighbor's house, and 2 German Shepherds killed all of them, got into the pen and killed. We had a mobile pen to put them in at nighttime, killed all of them and didn't eat a single bite. And we're just sitting there, good dogs, nice dogs, the next morning. And 2 were still alive, 2 were totally bloated and passed. And my husband was like, but there was 9 that were salvageable. My husband ran and got a gun at the neighbors where the sheep were. There was a neighbor between our house and where they were, and he grabbed a gun from the neighbor. He shot the 2 that were suffering. Their necks were all ripped out, and he went and got the tractor. He threw them all in the bucket of the tractor, and he ran back to the house, and he got his knives, and he got the forklifts, and he skinned them all, and he harvested. And he was like, "Call people!" He's like yelling at me, like, "Call people! Like, we don't have freezer space for all this. Like, call people! We're not letting this all go to waste." And I'm like crying. My pets are dead, and he's just jumps into action, and everybody I called, truth is, every white person I called was like, "I don't want any meat with trauma in it." And I remember thinking, it's weird. They think there's no trauma in the current meat system. That's interesting. That's interesting that they think like the meat they're eating is free of trauma. But anyways, but all the Latinos, farm worker families, families from the restaurant, all came, car after car, and we handed them 5-gallon buckets of meat. 5-gallon buckets of meat, and we're like, and my husband was like explaining, like, when you get home, rinse it all off, put salt on in the water, and then freeze it, and then, you know, take it out as you need it. And he's explaining what to do with everything. And I remember late that night, my husband came in and he had blood all over him, and he got in the shower, and he was like, I gave away, I don't remember, but, you know, 15 buckets of meat, and we have this much in the freezer. And I looked out my window, and Lorenzo, one of our employees, was still with the in English, what is it? What do you use for pickling lime? You know, was cleaning all the organs and the stomachs and everything, and for haggis and all that, and was clean and separating all the organ meat. And I thought, two things I thought in that moment. My husband and Lorenzo lived in a world where there wasn't enough food and understood the value of what was there. And nature is far more brutal than anything that I was ever going to do to an animal. To kill all those 11 sheep and not eat a bite just for fun. And I don't fault those dogs. Those dogs come from wolves, and it's their nature. But it's also our nature to cultivate animals and to cultivate farms in the way that we have and hunt, and that is our nature. Wow. And so I had that realization, and I had the realization that, and this was kind of in the beginning of that whole privilege, like there was a lot of people talking about privilege, and I remember thinking, veganism is such a privilege. And it doesn't mean it's not a valid choice. People should do what's best for their body and what feels good for their body. But carnivore is also a privilege. To eat only one kind of food is a privilege that is only afforded to very few countries in the world.
Totally.
And so this idea that everybody should do this thing that is an extreme privilege, to say, I'm only going to eat this kind of food and I'm only going to eat that kind of food. And people will turn around and say, well, you only want to eat food without poison in it, and that's a privilege. And I would say, yes, but it's also a privilege to eat cheap food that someone else exposed themselves to toxic chemicals in order to grow for you.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So they're both privileges. But so I just realized that the ideology that I had grown up in was not necessarily accurate. And at the same time, we were just regenerating the soil like crazy. Like we went from 0.01% organic matter to 20% organic matter in 5 years. We were just growing massive, $500,000 worth of produce on 17 acres, just growing massive amounts of food. So I was watching regenerative agriculture just explode with fertility on my farm. And all of that led me to believe we cannot live outside of nature. And we can think we can pretend we can live in apartments and sterilize everything and get more and more autoimmune diseases. But the reality is we're part of it.
Yes.
And that I made a conscious choice that my diet, what I was committed to as far as food for my family was no longer going to be about a specific thing like vegan, but it was going to be about, am I supporting more life or am I supporting less life? And I'm clear that regenerative agriculture supports more life. People don't like it. People want to argue with me. But I know that regenerative agriculture supports more life in the world. and conventional agriculture supports less life in the world. More biodiversity, more soil health, all of that comes from regenerative agriculture.